It's strange how life shifts once you pass 70. The things that once kept you awake at night, those old regrets, the missteps, the missed chances, they start to fade, like ripples smoothing out on a pond. You don't forget them, but you stop bleeding from them. In your younger years, you carry mistakes like heavy luggage, dragging them from one decade to the next, convinced they define who you are. But once you reach a certain age, you realize that most of those so-called mistakes, they were just lessons wearing different clothes. And the ones that seemed catastrophic at the time, they rarely turned out to matter as much as you feared. That's the wisdom of age, the ability to look back without flinching and sometimes even laugh. One of the first mistakes that stops mattering is taking the wrong career path, or several. You spent years climbing ladders you didn't even want to be on, staying in jobs because of fear, pride, or someone else's expectations. But at 70, no one's asking what your title was. No one's impressed by what you earned. What matters is how you treated people along the way. Were you kind? Were you decent? Did you make time for the ones you loved? That's what people remember. The resume fades, but your character stays. The corner office, the promotion you didn't get, the dream job that slipped through your fingers, they become stories, not scars. Another mistake that quietly loses its grip is holding grudges. In your 30s or 40s, it feels empowering to withhold forgiveness. You convince yourself that staying angry protects you. But after 70, you realize that grudge you held for decades only aged you faster. You wasted precious time rehearsing old hurts, replaying betrayals like broken records. Eventually, you stop needing to be right, and you start needing to be free. Forgiveness becomes less about the other person and more about lightening your own load. You realize that peace is more satisfying than vengeance, and the irony? Half the people you were mad at don't even remember the details anymore. Life moves on, and it's kinder to yourself if you do too. Then there's the mistake of chasing perfection, of trying to be the perfect parent, partner, or person. You tortured yourself, trying to say the right thing, do the right thing, be everything to everyone. But looking back, you realize nobody remembers the perfect moments. They remember the real ones. The messy dinners where everyone laughed, the quiet moments when you just showed up even when you didn't know what to say. You see now that your imperfections are where the love lived. The attempt to get everything right often just robbed you of joy. And now you understand being present beats being perfect every time. Love is another arena where we're often too hard on ourselves. You regret the hearts you broke or the ones that broke you. Maybe you stayed too long in something toxic, or maybe you walked away too soon from something rare. At the time, these choices feel enormous, like they'll define the rest of your life. But after 70, you realize love is not always meant to last. It's meant to teach. Even the heartbreaks had hidden gifts. They toughened you, softened you, or helped you grow. You stopped blaming yourself for what didn't work. Not all relationships are failures. Some are just chapters. You carry the lessons, not the guilt. Another mistake that loses its sting is comparing your life to others. You spent years measuring your success by someone else's ruler. You looked sideways more than you looked inward. You envied people's homes, careers, vacations, even their families. But now, you barely remember who those people were. You start to realize that your path was never supposed to look like theirs. Everyone has private battles, even those with picture-perfect lives. At this stage, you care more about peace than appearances. The things you used to chase to impress others now seem ridiculous. You trade admiration for inner calm any day. There's also the mistake of not enjoying your youth when you had it. You were so busy rushing through life, building, proving, surviving, that you forgot to live. You put off joy, convinced there would be time later, and now you know later is never guaranteed. You wish you danced more. You wish you took that road trip, wore the swimsuit, said yes to more spontaneous moments. But you also learned to forgive yourself for not knowing better. You were doing the best you could with what you had. So instead of regret, You begin to pass that wisdom forward. You encourage others not to wait to live. After 70, you also stop regretting the things you didn't buy. You don't care that you never got the sports car or the luxury watch. Most of that stuff ends up in storage or donated. What you miss are the people, the conversations, the sunsets. The mistake wasn't not owning more, it was not experiencing more. The real currency of life is attention, and you learn to spend it on moments, not things. That shift in values is liberating. You no longer crave more, you crave meaning. One mistake you do remember but now view with gentleness is staying silent when you should have spoken up. There were times you didn't defend yourself, times you swallowed your voice to keep the peace. And yes, you wish you had said more, stood taller, set clearer boundaries, but now you know that silence was survival. And you forgive that version of yourself. You also start speaking up more now, not to win arguments, but to honor your truth. Age makes you braver. The stakes are lower, and your voice finally feels like yours. Even parenting mistakes, those that used to haunt you, start to soften with time. You weren't always patient. You didn't always know what your kids needed. You carried guilt, sometimes quietly, sometimes heavily. But now you see, no one gets it perfect. And your children didn't need perfection. They needed love, consistency, effort. You realize the most healing words are, "I tried and I'm still learning." And often your adult children aren't looking to punish you for your missteps. They're looking to understand. Vulnerability becomes a bridge, and in that you find peace. And as more years pass, something even deeper unfolds. You begin to realize that many of your so-called mistakes were never mistakes at all. They were simply steps on a longer journey that only makes sense when you zoom out far enough. You stop cursing your detours and delays. That time you moved to the wrong city, chose the wrong partner, invested in the wrong idea. Those all helped shape who you became. Without them, you wouldn't have met the people who taught you what you know now. You wouldn't have developed the empathy that only failure can plant. Age gives you permission to stop labeling everything as right or wrong, and to start calling it all experience. You also realize that the social mistakes, the times you embarrassed yourself, said something awkward, didn't fit in, no longer hold power over you. When you're younger, those moments feel earth-shattering. You replay them over and over, wishing for a redo. But at 70 and beyond, you see how little anyone else remembers. People are too caught up in their own worries to hold on to yours. You free yourself from the prison of overthinking. You understand that being authentic was never the mistake, pretending was. The people who really matter don't need you to be polished. They just need you to be real. Time also softens your relationship with your body. In youth, every perceived flaw feels like a verdict. You avoid mirrors. You push yourself to conform. You punish yourself for not looking the way society demands. But as the decades roll on, your body becomes less of an enemy and more of a miracle. Yes, it sags, slows and stiffens, but it carried you here. It got you through illnesses, heartbreaks, births, late nights, long walks. You stop resenting its imperfections and start thanking it. You realize the mistake wasn't having a body that aged. The mistake was not loving it sooner. And then there's the deep regret many feel around time lost with loved ones. You may remember all the times you were too busy to call, too stubborn to visit, too distracted to listen. These can hurt. They're the kind of mistakes that come with a sting. But aging gives you one last gift perspective. You stop running from these memories and begin to sit with them. You let them teach you. And through that, you make new choices. You show up for the people who are still here. You write letters. You pick up the phone. You become the version of yourself your younger self didn't know how to be. The other mistake that gently dissolves over time is the fear of being alone. Earlier in life, solitude can feel like punishment. Being single, losing friends, or outliving your partner can feel like failure. But once you pass 70, You begin to embrace the quiet. You learn to find your own rhythm. You start walking slower, observing more, listening deeper. You discover there's a kind of companionship in silence. You find joy in small routines, comfort in the familiar. You realize you're not truly alone. You're with yourself. And finally, that feels like enough. Regret over parenting choices can linger well into your later years. Maybe you worked too much. Maybe you weren't emotionally available. Maybe you simply didn't know how to do better. But as you grow older, you also grow softer. You understand that guilt serves no one if it just sits there. You begin to transform guilt into connection. You speak more openly. You apologize, but not as a punishment, rather as an offering. And you realize that vulnerability heals far more than defensiveness ever did. The mistake wasn't being imperfect. The mistake would be never trying to repair what was broken. And you also reflect on the emotional walls you built, how you shut people out to avoid getting hurt. In youth, that might have looked like strength. But after 70, you realize that real strength is in staying open. You regret the love you didn't give, the kind words you withheld, the hugs you didn't offer, the emotions you buried so deep they never saw the light of day. Now you choose softness. Time is short, so you tell people you love them. You cry when it comes, laugh when it wants to. You don't flinch at tenderness, you make space for it. Many people also come to terms with a lifelong mistake, thinking happiness would come someday. Someday when you made more money, someday when you retired, someday when the house was cleaner or the kids grown. But the hard-earned truth is that someday is a myth. Happiness was always hiding in the ordinary moments, a quiet cup of tea, a walk in the garden, a joke shared over dinner. At 70, you understand that joy isn't loud, it's consistent. The mistake was waiting for a perfect moment, but the wisdom is knowing that any moment can be perfect if you pay enough attention. Another mistake you outgrow is the need to be understood by everyone. In earlier years, you exhaust yourself trying to explain your choices. You worry about what people will say. You bend yourself to please. But with age comes release. You start to understand that not everyone is meant to get you, and that's okay. The freedom in not explaining yourself is profound. You don't argue about your boundaries anymore. You don't beg people to stay. You stop performing. And in that stillness, you become your truest self. The mistake wasn't being different. The mistake was apologizing for it. Perhaps the most unexpected shift is that even your biggest heartbreaks lose their sharpness. Time doesn't erase them, but it reframes them. The loss, the betrayal, the abandonment, they no longer define you. They become part of your story, but not the headline. You begin to realize that you survived more than you ever thought you could, and what once shattered you now strengthens you. The mistake was never in being broken. The mistake would have been never rebuilding. So what does all this mean for someone standing in their later years, or someone younger looking ahead? It means you can let go sooner. It means you can stop punishing yourself for things that time will one day forgive. It means that most of what you're beating yourself up over now won't matter later. And that's the beauty of elder wisdom. It gives you permission to soften, permission to rest, permission to rewrite the story. You may not be able to go back and fix everything, but you can go forward with gentleness. You can choose kindness for others and for yourself. And maybe that's what true wisdom looks like. Not in never making mistakes, but in knowing which ones never really mattered in the end. Finally, you stop regretting the times you wasted, days spent doing nothing, decisions that didn't lead anywhere, hobbies that went nowhere. You once thought every moment had to be productive, every goal had to lead somewhere. But now you cherish those slow days, the ones where you watched the rain, got lost in a book, or simply existed. You realize that life isn't just about milestones, it's about presence. The mistakes that don't matter are the ones where you simply lived. Not perfectly, but sincerely. So here's the quiet truth. Most of the things you thought would break you never did. Most of the mistakes you obsessed over turned into turning points, and most of the things you feared people would judge you for, they either forgot or they loved you anyway. At 70, you start to understand that your worth isn't measured in accomplishments, achievements, or a flawless record. It's in your resilience. It's in your capacity to keep showing up. And just maybe, it's in your ability to look back with both softness and strength and say, I lived. I made mistakes, but I learned, I loved, and I kept going.